Nietzsche perceived desire not as a naive impulse, but as a raw, vital, and inevitably dangerous force. For him, what we call love, passion, or ambition doesn't spring from purity, but from the will to power. A profound need to assert oneself, dominate and transcend one's own limits. Human desire, far from being merely tenderness, carries within itself shadows we avoid confronting. We seek to possess, shape, conquer, and often hide this instinct beneath masks of romanticism and morality. But what if desire were, in truth, a silent struggle between what we are and what we fear to be? What if every promise of love and fulfillment also concealed a spark of selfishness, of vanity, of the will to dominate? Nietzsche didn't write to comfort, but to tear away illusions. This dive is for those who want to look without fear into the underground of the soul. The secret of human desire doesn't lie in the beauty of surrender, but in the courage to recognize its cruelty and its grandeur. If this reflection touches something within you, subscribe to the channel and follow us on this journey. Nietzsche saw in desire something much greater than a simple passing wish. For him, desire is life's most intimate pulsation, the very manifestation of what he called the will to power. It's not just about wanting an object, a person, or an external conquest, but about a profound movement of being, a silent affirmation that one is alive. All wanting ultimately reveals this almost biological necessity to expand, to grow, to impose oneself upon the world. When someone desires, they don't desire only what seems evident. Those who desire love simultaneously seek recognition, intensity, an escape from solitude, and even confirmation of their own existence. Those who desire wealth aren't satisfied merely with material comfort, but with the sensation that their life has weight, influence, relevance. Behind the object of desire, there's always something greater. The yearning to become more, to not accept the limits that life imposes. Nietzsche distrusted the idea that desire was something pure, disinterested, or moved by natural goodness. For him, every form of wanting carries within itself a force that is, inevitably, one of conquest. Even the most delicate desire, such as being loved, also contains a spark of power, because loving and being loved also means feeling that one occupies a central place in another's life, that one has importance, that one is irreplaceable. This vision may seem harsh, but it invites us to look at our own experience with greater lucidity. Think of moments when you desired something intensely. Often, that intensity went beyond the object itself. The new car wasn't just a car, but the sensation of freedom, status, victory. The relationship wasn't just about affection, but about feeling complete, necessary, validated. Desire moves us because it promises more than it delivers, because it makes vibrate within us the sensation that life can be broader than what we experience now. Nietzsche said that life itself is the will to power. This means that even the most basic instinct, like hunger, isn't just the need to nourish oneself, but proof that the body wants to continue, expand its strength, assert itself against the threat of death. When we feel pleasure in satisfying a desire, what we experience deep down is the joy of continuing to affirm our existence against the resistances of the world. But here's the crucial point. Desire is never neutral. It's always active, always seeking something that goes beyond simple being. That's why we can't live without desiring. The absence of desire is a type of death in life, a void that corrodes. When we desire, we feel energy, movement, even when desire hurts us. This perspective reveals the ambiguous character of human wanting. It's vital, but also dangerous. It nourishes and destroys. It gives us wings, but also enslaves us. The dark secret of desire lies precisely in this ambivalence. It's life's engine, but also the source of our greatest pains. Nietzsche believed that those who try to repress desire, deny it, suffocate it in the name of some morality or ideal of purity, end up living an impoverished existence. Desire is vitality in its raw state. It's not about yielding to it blindly, but understanding it, accepting its force as an inevitable part of being human. It's desire that pushes us beyond mediocrity, that makes us seek more than mere survival. If you observe carefully, you'll realize that the most intense moments of your life were always connected to some burning desire, even when the result wasn't what was expected. The passion that consumes, the ambition that disturbs, the hunger for meaning that doesn't let you rest. It's in this turbulent territory that Nietzsche invites us to enter, recognizing that we are desiring beings and that there's no escaping this destiny. Thus, understanding desire as vital force is the first step to seeing its true nature. Not a whim of the heart, not a weakness of the flesh, but the purest expression of what it means to be alive. Nietzsche had an almost cruel ability to rip away the masks we use to make life bearable. And when he spoke of desire, he didn't hesitate to expose how much we deceive ourselves about our own intentions. We like to believe we desire out of purity, out of love, out of compassion. But for Nietzsche, these justifications are nothing but veils, disguises that try to cover the true force that moves us, the will to power. Think of romantic love, for example. How many passion stories are narrated as if they were acts of total surrender, as if loving were losing oneself in the other, abdicating oneself. But if we look closer, love is also wanting to possess. It's a silent demand for exclusivity, for importance. I love you can often mean, I want you to belong to me. I want you to recognize me as essential. Love, under this gaze, isn't innocence, but power disguised as tenderness. Nietzsche said that morality, in its different forms, functions the same way. Religion, social ethics, traditional values. All this creates narratives that hide the raw nature of human desire. When someone presents themselves as altruistic, as generous, it's almost impossible not to find, in the deeper layers, the desire to be seen as good, respected, admired. Even the act of serving one's neighbor can be a power game, a way to feel superior through one's own renunciation. These illusions are dangerous because they distance us from the truth of who we are. The more we believe our desires are pure and disinterested, the more we entangle ourselves in contradictions and resentments. A person who says, I just want to love without expecting anything in return, is in reality desiring exactly the opposite: recognition, reciprocity, importance. When this return doesn't happen, what's born is pain, rancor, the sensation of injustice. Nietzsche called this the morality of the weak, the attempt to transform impotence into virtue, masking the desire that couldn't be realized. Our daily life is full of these examples. Think of the person who prides themselves on working tirelessly for others. Apparently they're moved by generosity, but often what's at stake is the desire to be irreplaceable, to feel that no one could live without their dedication. Or the friend who always advises with beautiful and moralistic phrases. Does he really care about the other's well-being? Or does he secretly desire to feel wiser, more mature, more above the rest? Nietzsche didn't say this to accuse or condemn, but to awaken. Recognizing the masks of desire is a form of liberation. When we understand that loving is also wanting to possess, that helping is also wanting recognition, that being moral is also wanting power over others, we can abandon the illusion of purity and begin dealing with our nature more honestly. And here arises an uncomfortable question: why do we need these masks so much? Perhaps because the truth of desire is too intense to bear. Admitting that we love because we want to be central in another's life hurts the ideal of romantic love we learn to idolize. Admitting that we help out of vanity hurts the image we want to maintain of ourselves. The masks exist because we need, at least in part, to believe we're not so cruel, so selfish, so dominated by the will to power. But Nietzsche believed this denial weakens us. By hiding desire's true nature, we lose the chance to use it as creative force. The masks make desire small, limited, suffocated in moralities. Courage, he said, lies in stripping wanting of its illusions, in looking without fear at its brutality, and from that, transforming it into potency. Perhaps the greatest illusion is believing that desire can be domesticated into purity. What Nietzsche teaches us is that true strength only exists when we accept the darkness that comes with light. Desire doesn't need masks, it needs courage to be recognized in all its intensity. Nietzsche never believed desire was a tranquil experience. On the contrary, he saw in the act of desiring a constant source of tension, contradiction, and even suffering. Desiring inevitably means being at war with oneself and with the world. Every time we want something, we simultaneously discover our lack, our incompleteness, the open wound of not yet being what we'd like to be. Desire is born from emptiness, from carency, from a sensation of insufficiency. It's as if, in the instant we want, we were confessing, I'm not whole, something's missing, I need to complete myself outside of me. And it's exactly this recognition of lack that wounds, that disturbs, that throws us into a permanent battlefield. One who desires is never at peace, because they find themselves between the frustration of not yet possessing and the anxiety of conquering. Nietzsche identified in desire a kind of paradoxical movement. It propels us toward life, but also reveals existence's wound. We want because we feel we're not yet. We want because life, in its current state, isn't enough for us. Desire is, therefore, both the motor of expansion and the cruel reminder of what we lack. If we think of everyday experiences, desire's pain becomes evident. Whoever has fallen intensely in love knows the anguish of not being reciprocated, the anxiety of waiting for a message, the obsession of imagining the other in every detail. Loving, in this sense, isn't just sweetness, it's also constant torment. Even when love is reciprocated, desire doesn't quiet down. It wants more intensity, more proximity, more certainty. It's never enough. It's like a flame that consumes without ceasing, always asking for more fuel. Nietzsche saw in this one of human life's greatest contradictions. We desire to relieve the suffering of lack, but desire itself takes charge of creating new lacks, new pains, new abysses. When we finally conquer something, we discover it wasn't exactly what we imagined. The object of desire, once achieved, reveals itself smaller than the fantasy we created around it. The pleasure of obtaining is always less than the tension of searching. That's why so many people live in an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. They conquer, feel empty, desire again. It's as if we were condemned to an eternal race, always trying to capture something that escapes as soon as we think we've reached it. Nietzsche, contrary to many philosophers who exalted calm and serenity, didn't see this as a tragedy to be avoided. For him, this pain was part of life's grandeur. Desire's pain reminds us we're alive, that we're beings in movement, that we don't content ourselves with little. It's this discomfort that prevents us from falling into paralysis, conformism, mediocrity. Dissatisfaction is, paradoxically, what makes us create, seek, transform. Without it, life would be a desert of indifference. But of course, this vision doesn't eliminate the suffering that desire causes. Nietzsche invites us to recognize it without masks. Desire is struggle, and every struggle implies pain. There's no way to desire deeply without risking frustration, rejection, loss. There's no way to want intensely without also feeling the vulnerability of not possessing. Desire exposes us, places us naked before our most intimate carencies. Think of someone who obstinately pursues professional success. They sacrifice hours of sleep, personal relationships, moments of rest. The desire for recognition and conquest pushes them forward, but at the same time torments them. With each victory, a new goal arises, and rest never comes. Desire doesn't quiet down because its nourishment is precisely the sensation that something's always lacking. Nietzsche would say, this is the price of life lived intensely. Those who try to flee from desire's pain end up taking refuge in an anesthetized existence, marked by renunciation and apathy. Many resort to ideals of resignation, preaching total detachment, denial of wanting, as if it were possible to escape this fire. But Nietzsche considered this a form of nihilism, a refusal of life itself. Greatness lies in bearing desire's pain without trying to erase it. It's accepting that wanting means suffering and still choosing to desire more, live more, risk more. Conflict isn't a defect to be corrected, but a fundamental condition of existence. Those who throw themselves into desire expose themselves to the abyss, but also discover what it means to be fully alive. Nietzsche even suggests that creativity itself is born from this tension. The artist who creates a work, the thinker who develops an idea, the lover who writes a passionate letter, all are moved by desire's pain. It's the discomfort of not being complete that gives birth to music, poetry, philosophy. Desire wounds us, but it's from this wound that our most intense expressions sprout. Thus, the Nietzschean key isn't to deny desire's conflict, but to learn to dance with it. Desiring is suffering, but it's also expanding. The secret doesn't lie in seeking definitive satisfaction, because it will never come, but in transforming dissatisfaction itself into creative movement. Desire as pain is, at the same time, desire as source of potency. And perhaps that's the great lesson. It's not about curing desire, but embracing its wound. It's not about erasing pain, but understanding it as an essential part of life. Only then, instead of being crushed by lack, can we use lack as fuel to become greater than we are. Nietzsche never feared affirming that behind each human gesture, there's a spark of power. And when we speak of desire, this spark transforms into fire. Desiring isn't just wanting something, it's wanting that something to bend to our will, to become part of our world, to adjust to our way of existing. It's not enough to have, one must dominate. Desire, when looked at without illusions, reveals its darkest face, that of a struggle for self-affirmation over the other. Think of love. We like to describe it as surrender, as harmonious union, as the dissolution of I into we. But Nietzsche forces us to face what we don't want to admit. Loving is also wanting to possess, wanting to be irreplaceable, wanting to occupy the center of another's life. That's why love easily transforms into jealousy, control, manipulation. The passionate one, when feeling the possibility of losing the beloved, doesn't suffer only from the absence of affection, but from the narcissistic wound of no longer being the one who occupies the privileged place. And the same happens with other desires. When someone pursues political power, social influence, or prestige, it's not just about wanting recognition, but wanting to impose oneself over others, to decide, to be heard above other voices. Even in banal situations like a conversation, the desire for power manifests. The one who speaks louder, who interrupts, who seeks to convince, is exercising on a small scale this will to impose their worldview. Nietzsche saw this not as a moral defect, but as life's very essence. Living is affirming oneself, expanding oneself, fighting for space. Every organism, to some extent, seeks to dominate the environment, mold it to itself, conquer territory. The plant that grows toward light, the animal that defends its territory, the human being who competes for attention, all express in different ways the same will to power. Desire, then, is the form through which this will become concrete in our lives. But this truth is difficult to accept because it wounds our image of ourselves. We like to think we seek relationships out of love, that we work out of dedication, that we help out of altruism. Nietzsche, however, shows us that even in these situations, there's a power dynamic. Those who love want to be loved back and want the other to love them more than anything else. Those who help desire, often without realizing, gratitude, recognition, the sensation of moral superiority. Those who work to exhaustion, besides seeking sustenance, seek to prove themselves stronger, more capable, more resistant than others. This doesn't mean all desires are cruel or destructive. Nietzsche didn't condemn the will to power. On the contrary, he saw it as creative force. Dominating isn't just subjugating, but also building, organizing, giving form. The artist dominates the chaos of emotions and transforms it into music. The thinker dominates the flow of experience and translates it into ideas. Even in love, the desire for power can be a way of intensifying life, creating bonds that, although conflictive, give depth to existence. Danger arises when we try to deny this dimension of domination. When we believe desire is only purity, we fall into illusions that weaken us. Jealousy, for example, only becomes destructive because we believe loving should be disinterested, and then we're ashamed of our urge to possess. If we accepted that love always carries a desire for power, perhaps we'd deal with it more lucidly, less hypocritically. Nietzsche believed this denial of power generates resentment. Those who can't realize their desires often take refuge in morality discourses, condemning as selfish or cruel those who conquer. Thus they create values that glorify humility, renunciation, obedience, as if they were virtues. But in Nietzsche's view, all this is nothing but a strategy of the weak to disguise their impotence. Deep down, they also desire to dominate, but incapable of doing so, they transform their incapacity into goodness. Recognizing this dark dimension of desire shouldn't lead us to cynicism, but to courage. Accepting that desiring is also wanting to dominate means abandoning illusions and beginning to deal with life as it is. This makes us freer because we no longer need to hide behind masks of purity. We can love knowing there's power involved. We can create knowing there's vanity mixed in. We can help knowing there's desire for recognition at play. Desire, as power, is ambiguous. It can generate tyranny, but also creation. It can transform into suffocating control, but can also be fuel for intense relationships and grandiose works. Everything depends on how we choose to deal with this force. Nietzsche provokes us to abandon fear and assume desire's greatness. Yes, desiring is wanting to dominate, but this doesn't need to be a curse. It can be the key to a more intense, more creative, more authentic life. When we recognize this truth, we stop being slaves to our illusions and become little by little masters of our own potency. Nietzsche saw in desire not only the root of conflicts and pains, but also the source of everything humanity produced that was grandiose. The same flame that burns and disturbs can be transformed into creation, into art, into thought. It's in this process that the philosopher speaks, indirectly, about the possibility of sublimating desire. Not in the sense of denying or repressing it, but of transfiguring it into something greater, giving it a form that surpasses mere immediate impulse. When we think of desire, we almost always associate it with possession. I want something, I want someone, I want to be recognized. But for Nietzsche, the will to power can express itself creatively. The artist, for example, doesn't desire only applause or fame. He desires to transform life into work, give form to inner chaos, convert pain into beauty. That's why so many masterpieces are born from suffering. The musician who composes amid solitude, the painter who transforms anguish into colors, the poet who writes before absence. The desire that could paralyze becomes motor for something greater. Nietzsche believed the human being is capable of taking their most intense passions, love, ambition, resentment, pain, and giving them a creative destiny. This transfiguration is, for him, one of life's highest forms of expression. Instead of drowning in dissatisfaction's void, the individual who sublimates their desire finds in lack itself a reason to create worlds. Think, for example, of sexual desire. It is undoubtedly one of the most intense forces that move humanity. But when sublimated, it can transform into erotic poetry, sculptures, dances, music that crosses generations. What began as bodily impulse becomes aesthetic and cultural experience, enriching not only individual life, but everyone's life. Nietzsche spoke of this when exalting great creators, those who were capable of transforming their internal turbulence into something lasting. For him, genius isn't someone who lives in peace, but someone who carries torments greater than most, and who, precisely because of this, needs to give them form. Desire, then, ceases being only blind force and becomes expression of greatness. But care is needed here. Nietzsche didn't believe in sublimation as escape, as if it were possible to spiritualize desire to get rid of it. Desire continues being crude, intense, often cruel. The difference is that instead of manifesting only in immediate possession, it finds a channel that amplifies its potency. It's not about denying the body, but expanding it in creations that carry something immortal. If we look at daily life, we'll see this transformation isn't the privilege of great artists. All of us, at some moment, sublimate our desires. When someone writes in a diary to relieve their pain, they're transforming desire into expression. When someone channels their frustration into physical training, they're converting their restlessness into strength. When someone takes their passion and translates it into a life project, they're sublimating. Even small gestures already reveal this possibility of giving desire a creative destiny. Nietzsche saw in this an answer to the fundamental question: how to live without being destroyed by wanting's intensity. The answer isn't erasing desire, but transforming it into creation. Life, for him, isn't bearable through calm or absence of pain, but through the capacity to give pain a form that makes it fertile. And there's something even deeper in this idea. By sublimating desire, human beings not only free themselves from their own contradictions, but contribute to culture's expansion. All art, all philosophy, all science was born from unsatisfied desires, from questions that burned, from restlessness that didn't let sleep. What we call human spirit is largely the result of desire sublimation throughout history. Therefore, Nietzsche saw life as a work of art. Each of us, in dealing with our desires, can choose between suffocating them, letting ourselves be enslaved by them, or transforming them into creation. The first option generates resentment and apathy. The second generates compulsion and destruction. But the third, although more difficult, generates greatness. Courage is needed to take desire's fire and put it into words, gestures, works. Boldness is needed to transform one's own pain into beauty. In this sense, sublimation isn't a passive process, but an act of power. Dominating desire doesn't mean crushing it, but orienting it, giving it a path that intensifies life instead of destroying it. It's as if each person were, in themselves, a potential artist, capable of molding the raw energy that moves them into something that surpasses their own existence. Nietzsche believed those who manage to sublimate their desires become stronger, more complete, more affirmative. They don't flee from life, but embrace it with all its pain and intensity. They don't hide behind moralisms that condemn desire, but also don't let themselves be enslaved by blind impulses. They transform wanting into creation, and that's what makes them creators of meaning. Perhaps that's the secret Nietzsche leaves us. Life will never be tranquil, because desire will never leave us in peace. But it's exactly because of this that we can transform it into something grandiose. Sublimation is the invitation not to waste the flame, not to let it destroy us, but to use it as fuel for a creative, intense, and profoundly human life. Throughout this journey, we've seen that desire is vital force, mask, conflict, power, and creation. But there's one last truth that Nietzsche insists on teaching us. It's not enough to understand desire. One must have courage to desire it in its most intense form. Because living is inevitably diving into this fire. Denying desire is denying life itself. Nietzsche harshly criticized all philosophies and religions that sought detachment as solution to human suffering. For him, renouncing wanting was just another name for resignation, weakness, and nihilism. Those who say, "I don't want anything anymore," haven't found peace but have only given up the fight. They're someone who no longer has strength to affirm life in its intensity. And Nietzsche provoked us. Would this really be living, or just surviving in silence? Desiring intensely is risking oneself. It's admitting we'll be wounded, frustrated, rejected. It's knowing the pleasure of conquest will never eliminate the thirst that generated it. But it's also accepting this movement is what makes us human, what takes us out of apathy, what makes us grow. Having courage to desire means opening oneself to pain and still saying yes to life. Think of someone who, despite all love disappointments, continues believing in encounters' intensity. This person knows they might get hurt again, but prefers risking than closing themselves off. Or think of someone who, despite all defeats, insists on pursuing a dream, creating a project, writing a book, launching themselves at the impossible. These are examples of Nietzschean courage, the decision to continue desiring, even when desire has already shown its cruelest face. Nietzsche called this amor fati, love of destiny, passionate acceptance of what life brings, with all its pains and joys. Having courage to desire is deep down loving one's own life as it is, not expecting it to be perfect, but affirming it with all its imperfection. It's as if we said, even knowing I'll suffer, I still choose to live fully, I still choose to desire. This attitude is rare because it requires inner strength. Many prefer deadening their desires, living moderately, without great passions or great risks. But Nietzsche would say this is cowardice disguised as prudence. Not living intensely may seem safe, but is actually a slow way of dying while alive. The courage to desire is the opposite. It's putting oneself entirely in existence's game, knowing nothing guarantees victory, but that the simple act of playing is already greatness. And here arises a decisive provocation. What would happen if you really gave voice to your deepest desires without fear, without masks? What would change in your life if instead of repressing, you affirmed what you truly want? Perhaps this is the most difficult question of all, because it forces us to face not only our wants, but also our omissions. How many times have we stopped living intensely out of fear of pain? How many times have we sacrificed our desires to maintain the appearance of balance? Nietzsche doesn't offer easy answers. He doesn't promise eternal happiness nor tranquil harmony. What he offers is an invitation to greatness, living so intensely that even pain becomes part of celebration. Having courage to desire is accepting life won't be smooth, but that it can be grandiose. This courage also frees us from mediocrity. Because desiring intensely is leaving repetition, it's not contenting oneself with crumbs. It's refusing life reduced to routine and obligations. It's seeking something greater, even if never fully achieved. Greatness lies in the path, in movement, in intensity, and not in a final point of satisfaction. Nietzsche believed strong spirits aren't those who avoid pain, but those who traverse it without losing the capacity to affirm. They're those who, even facing falls and losses, continue desiring. They're rare, but they're the ones who transform life into work, who make suffering fuel, who don't let themselves be reduced to resentment. Perhaps the dark secret of human desire is exactly this. It never brings peace, but brings intensity. It doesn't guarantee happiness, but guarantees vitality. Courage doesn't lie in extinguishing the fire, but in dancing within it. In the end, desiring intensely is saying yes to life with all its contradictions. It's accepting we'll never be complete, but that this incompleteness is the very source of our strength. It's realizing each pain, each absence, each lack can be the impulse to create something new, to live something greater. And the great question Nietzsche leaves echoing is, do you have courage to desire to the end? We've reached the end of this journey through the dark secret of human desire. We've seen that desiring is vital force, mask, pain, power, creation, and finally courage. Nietzsche invites us to abandon illusions and face desire in all its intensity, not as something to be denied, but as the motor that makes us human, that puts us in movement, that forces us to grow. Now I ask you, what was the desire that most shaped your life and that still burns within you today? What city are you watching from? Comment below and share your reflection, like this video, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring together the deepest mysteries of the human soul. I thank you from the heart for walking with me in this reflection. This community exists because you choose to dive into philosophy sincerely and transformatively.